From our Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I am Ahmed Ramadan. Talks resume in Cairo under U.S. mediation, but Israel rejects a Gaza ceasefire as airstrikes continue despite Trump's proposed peace plan. This and more on today's show. Stay tuned. Israeli authorities tortured, beat, and humiliated Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg while in their custody before deporting her along with 170 others detained from the global Samud flotilla. The flotilla was made up of 42 vessels carrying 532 activists from more than 45 countries. It was the largest aid convoy to sail towards the region in years before being intercepted. Witnesses say Israeli guards dragged Thunberg by the hair, slammed her against a wall, and kept her handcuffed for hours without food or water. Turkish activist Arson said soldiers severely tortured Greta before our eyes, calling her treatment inhumane and deliberate. Thunberg later told Swedish officials she was held in a bedbug-infested cell, mocked by guards, and denied medical care despite injuries. The flotilla of more than 40 civilian boats with activists from more than 45 countries had been intercepted in international waters while attempting to deliver aid to Gaza. Australian journalist Surya McEwen said his arm was dislocated and his head slammed into the ground. Filmmaker Juliette Lamont described the Kaziyat desert prison in southern Israel as dystopian, saying she was zip-tied, sprayed with a water cannon, and left soaked for hours. Moroccan journalist Younes Ait Yassin said detainees faced verbal, physical, and physiological assaults. Israel confirmed it deported 171 activists to Greece and Slovakia. Another 137, including 4 Moroccans, were flown to Istanbul. Congresswoman Tlaib has accused Israel of illegally kidnapping hundreds of peace activists who were part of the global Samud flotilla heading to Gaza. The flotilla was made up of 42 vessels carrying 532 activists from more than 45 countries. It was the largest aid convoy to sail towards the region in years before being intercepted. It was organized by the International Committee to break the siege on Gaza. Israel has maintained a blockade on Gaza for 18 years. About 1.5 million Palestinians remain displaced amid continuing Israeli attacks and bombardment, with homes, hospitals, and shelters in ruins. On social media, Tlaib said more than 450 participants, including 24 U.S. citizens, were illegally abducted by Israeli soldiers. She demanded that the Israeli government immediately release the activists and protect them from abuse. Tlaib is urging Washington to hold Israel accountable for violating international law. Free-Palestine activists around the world are preparing global protests on Tuesday, October 7th, marking 2 years of the start of Israel's genocide in Gaza. They are planning demonstrations in major cities. In the U.S., the group Within Our Lifetime has urged supporters to flood New York for Gaza. They are calling the day a tribute to Palestinians killed by Israel. On campuses, the National Students for Justice in Palestine has announced a week of rage, urging students to demand an end to U.S. support for Israel. In Australia, the country's Palestine Action Group will hold a vigil in Sydney and rallies across nearly 20 cities. American Muslims for Palestine, or AMP, won a major legal victory as a U.S. federal court blocked the state of Virginia's attempt to seize its donor and supporter information. Representing the organization, the Muslim Legal Fund of America's attorneys secured a temporary restraining order against the Virginia Attorney General. It halts the state's demand while appeals continue. The court's decision is seen as a key win for free speech and civil rights. AMP says the case was about protecting the constitutional right to speak, organize, and give without fear of political intimidation. As negotiators from both sides head to Cairo for indirect talks under U.S. mediation, Israel says there is no ceasefire in Gaza. President Donald Trump told CNN Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu supports his 20-point peace plan for Gaza, which includes phased truce, prisoner exchange, and interim international administration for Gaza. On Friday, he called on Israel to cease its bombing of the region, but Israel has continued its attacks. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that airstrikes must stop to allow for any prisoner exchange. Hamas has agreed to release prisoners but remains cautious on wider political terms. The latest talks are being hosted by Egypt with participation by Qatar, which Israel bombed last month. Israeli soldiers have killed at least 104 Palestinians since October 3rd, when President Donald Trump urged Israel to halt its bombing campaign. The Gaza government media office says Israeli forces launched more than 131 airstrikes on densely populated areas, attacking homes, refugee camps, and aid centers. In the last 24 hours alone, officials say Israel killed 24 Palestinians and wounded 96 others. They also report the Israeli army killed 2 Palestinians and injured 19 others who were trying to get humanitarian aid. Israeli soldiers also opened fire on civilians seeking food aid south of Wadi Gaza. Israel's heavy bombing shook Gaza City through the weekend. Witnesses say explosive barrels were dropped by remote-controlled vehicles on residential blocks. Al Arabiya reports Israeli strikes on the Orthodox Rum school, while tanks shelled the Shujaya neighborhood and areas north of Khan Yunis. Israel's genocide in Gaza has killed at least 67,160 people and wounded 169,679 since October 2023, with projections expecting the actual numbers to be in the hundreds of thousands. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Secretary Yoav Gallant for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Gaza. Federal agents in Chicago shot and wounded a woman after a vehicle ramming incident. Details coming up after the break. Welcome back. CNN commentator Van Jones has apologized after backlash over remarks about dead children in Gaza. Speaking on HBO's Overtime with Bill Maher, he blamed Iran and Qatar for running what he claims are disinformation campaigns on TikTok and Instagram. He drew criticism after jokingly referring to young people's social media feeds as being full of dead Gaza baby images. The comment drew outrage online. Texas-based Islamic scholar Omar Sulaiman called it vile and accused Jones of trivializing Palestinian suffering. Jones later posted an apology on X, saying his words were flat-out insensitive and easily misunderstood. But even in his apology, Jones repeated unsubstantiated claims that foreign disinformation was driving outrage over Israel's genocide on Gaza, offering no evidence to support that assertion. He admitted that suffering of Gaza's children is not a punchline. He added, "Babies are dying every day in Gaza. Nobody should make light of it. I'm praying and working for the end of this war." Jones said he had intended to highlight foreign disinformation, but acknowledged his phrasing caused deep hurt. Critics say his comments reflect a broader attempt to dismiss graphic realities from Gaza as propaganda rather than confronting them. In Chicago, federal agents shot and wounded a woman after a chaotic vehicle ramming incident. The Department of Homeland Security, or DHS, says the woman, identified as Marimar Martinez, was armed and part of a group of at least 10 vehicles that surrounded and rammed law enforcement cars. Officers from U.S. Customs and Border Protection fired what they called defensive shots after agents were trapped and unable to move. DHS official Tricia McLaughlin said one driver had a semi-automatic weapon. Martinez was hit but managed to drive herself to Mount Sinai Hospital, where she was treated before being taken into FBI custody. McLaughlin added Martinez had been listed in an intelligence bulletin for allegedly posting personal details of agents online. Another suspect, Anthony Ian Santos Ruiz, was also detained. It remains unclear if either has been charged. DHS says the investigation is ongoing. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump has called up 300 National Guard troops from Illinois and 400 from Texas to serve immediately for an initial 2 months. As well, Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson signed an executive order today prohibiting U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and other federal agencies from using city property for civil immigration enforcement. It applies to all parking lots, garages, and vacant lots owned and controlled by the city, including Chicago public school property. The Trump administration has sent a new 10-page proposal to 9 major U.S. universities to reshape higher education under federal oversight. Named the Compact for Academic Excellence, it asks schools such as the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, the University of Pennsylvania, the University of Southern California, and the University of Virginia to align with Trump's policy priorities. It would be enforced by the Justice Department. The compact bans race and gender factors in admissions and demands the use of Scholastic Assessment Test, or SAT. It also orders colleges to protect conservative speech. Universities that sign the deal will be ordered to freeze tuition for 5 years and limit foreign students to 15%. Wealthier schools will be required to waive tuition for science majors. Observers say the proposal reflects a political takeover of higher education. California Governor Gavin Newsom has warned that universities could lose state funds if they sign the agreement. Universities must respond to the proposal by November 21st. Severe floods have displaced more than 1,200 families in Bahri City, part of Sudan's Khartoum state, the UN Migration Agency said Sunday. The International Organization for Migration reports 5 homes were destroyed, while many others were partially damaged. Several families fled in advance, fearing the rising Nile waters. Those displaced have taken shelter with nearby host communities. Flooding has worsened across Sudan as water levels rise in the Nile and its tributaries. Government data show more than 125,000 people have been affected by rains and floods since June 30th. Sudan's rainy season from June to October often brings devastating floods. The crisis comes as the country is gripped by war between the army and the Rapid Support Forces, which has killed thousands and uprooted millions since April 2023. Police in southern England are investigating an arson attack on a mosque in Peacehaven, East Sussex, as a hate crime. Emergency crews were called late Saturday after flames engulfed the mosque's entrance. Footage show 2 masked figures spraying an accelerant before setting the door alight. Firefighters quickly put out the blaze. No one was hurt, but the mosque and a nearby car were badly damaged. Sussex police released images of 2 suspects, one wearing a black pre-London jacket and the other bright red gloves. Detective Inspector Gavin Patch called it an appalling and reckless attack and urged anyone with information to come forward. Police have stepped up patrols around local places of worship. Mosque leaders thanked the community for its support, saying the town will not be divided by hate. Another London mosque said this was the second violent attack on worshippers in a week. Pakistan has warned any future conflict with India could lead to what it called cataclysmic devastation. The military issued the warning after Indian Army Chief General Upendra Dwivedi said his forces would show no restraint next time and accused Islamabad of backing terrorism. Pakistan's army said it was deeply concerned by what it described as provocative and jingoistic remarks from Indian leaders. India's Defense Minister Rajnath Singh last week warned of a decisive response to Pakistan if it claims the disputed Sir Creek region. The statement said Pakistan had both the capability and resolve to respond forcefully, vowing to take the fight to every corner of Indian territory if attacked. Tensions have been rising since the brief four-day war in May that followed an attack in Indian-administered Kashmir. The clash ended after President Donald Trump brokered a truce on May 10th. Rohingya Muslims have urged the United Nations to stop the ongoing killings and persecution of their community in Burma. Speaking at the first high-level UN meeting on the crisis, activist YY New called the appeal long overdue, saying decades of violence and displacement must end. UN officials said Burma's military continues to target Rohingya communities in Rakhine State, where they face forced labor, arrest, and denial of basic rights. UN Refugee Chief Filippo Grandi said Bangladesh now shelters 1.2 million Rohingya, with thousands more fleeing renewed fighting. Activists demanded a UN-supervised safe zone and international protection. UN envoy Julie Bishop warned there is no sign of peace or credible elections under military control. General Assembly President Annalena Baerbock closed the meeting, pledging concrete follow-up, saying, "Today is just a starting point. We must do more." At Japan's Sokandai University, genetics program student Islam Motushi has received the prestigious Dean's Award from the School of Life Science for the first semester of 2025. It honors exceptional research and academic excellence among degree recipients. Islam is a member of the Molecular Cell Engineering Laboratory. She was recognized for her doctoral thesis titled Advancing the Utility of A2-Based Conditional Protein Knockdown. Islam also received the Genetics Program Morishima Award. She thanked her supervisor, Professor Masato Kanimaki, and her colleagues at Japan's National Institute of Genetics for their support and mentorship. Islam says the recognition gives her powerful motivation to continue her scientific journey with passion and dedication. That's all from our Toronto studios. Thank you for watching Muslim News. We are a community channel dedicated to bringing you stories you can trust. Please like, share, and subscribe to our content. You can also comment to let us know what you think of our coverage. You can donate now by visiting muslimnetwork.tv/donate. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV. Salam.